Welcome to my channel. What if I told you that one man, before he turned 33, conquered the largest empire the world had ever seen and never lost a single battle? Sounds like something from a movie, right? But this was real. His name was Alexander the Great, and his life was filled with mystery, ambition, and battles that changed the course of history forever. So how did the son of a king become one of the most powerful and unstoppable leaders the world has ever known? Stay with me, because today we're diving deep into the rise of Alexander the Great, and you won't believe how it all happened. Chapter 1: The Boy Who Would Be King. Alexander the Great was not always great. He began life like any other child, but with a difference. He was born into power. He came into the world in 356 BC in a city called Pella, the capital of the ancient kingdom of Macedonia. His father was King Philip II, a strong and clever warrior who had turned Macedonia into a powerful force in Greece. His mother, Olympias, was a proud, spiritual woman who told young Alexander that he was not just a prince, but the son of gods. She believed deeply in myths and dreams, and often told Alexander that he was descended from Achilles, the famous Greek hero. These stories made a deep impression on him. He grew up not just feeling royal, but destined for something far greater. As a child, Alexander was curious and full of energy. He loved to read, learn, and ask questions. He also loved challenges. One famous story from his youth shows just how brave and determined he was. When he was around 10 years old, a wild horse named Bucephalus was brought to the palace. No one could tame it. The horse was strong, wild, and dangerous. But Alexander noticed something. The horse was scared of its own shadow. He turned the horse toward the sun so it wouldn't see the shadow, gently calmed it, and then rode it for the first time. Everyone was amazed. His father, King Philip, proudly told him, "My son, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you." Alexander's education was also very special. His father hired one of the greatest teachers in history, Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher. From Aristotle, Alexander learned about philosophy, science, medicine, literature, and politics. He read books like Homer's Iliad, which told the story of the Trojan War. Alexander loved the character of Achilles and wanted to be like him, brave, proud, and unbeatable in battle. Aristotle didn't just teach him facts. He taught him how to think, how to lead, and how to see the world with a bigger mind. This mix of education and ambition made Alexander different from other princes. He wasn't only strong, he was smart. And he wasn't just smart. He was hungry for something more. As Alexander grew older, he began to join his father in military campaigns. He learned how to ride with soldiers, how to fight in battles, and how to lead men. He wasn't afraid of blood or war. He loved strategy, and he watched his father closely. King Philip was a master of war and politics. But even as he admired his father, Alexander also wanted to be more than just his son. He wanted to build his own name, his own legend. He wanted to go beyond Macedonia and Greece, to rule the world. By the time he was a teenager, Alexander had already shown signs of greatness. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was becoming a leader, but fate was about to test him. In 336 BC, something shocking happened. His father, King Philip, was murdered. No one knew exactly why. Some say it was politics. Others say it was jealousy. Some even think his own mother was involved. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. Philip was dead, and Alexander was now king. He was only 20 years old. Most people thought he was too young, too weak, or too inexperienced to rule. Enemies began to rise. Rivals wanted the throne. The empire was at risk of falling apart. But Alexander didn't hide. He didn't run. He took control. And what he did next would shock the world. Do you want to know how a 20-year-old boy held an empire together, defeated his enemies, and began his path to glory? Stay with me, because in the next chapter, we'll see how Alexander went from being a young king to becoming a living legend. Chapter 2: Death of a King, Rise of a Legend. The year was 336 BC. King Philip II had just been murdered at a public celebration. The crowd was still in shock. People were confused, angry, and afraid. And in the middle of all this chaos stood a young man, just 20 years old, named Alexander. His father was dead, and now the weight of the kingdom rested on his shoulders. Most people expected things to fall apart. After all, Alexander was young and untested. Could he really control an empire built by such a powerful king? Could he keep the enemies away, unite the people, and stop others from stealing the throne? The answer came fast, and it came with force. The moment Alexander became king, he acted with speed and strength. He knew that hesitation would be dangerous. In Macedonia, power could be lost in a single day. So, the first thing he did was remove any threats to his rule. He ordered the execution of potential rivals, people who might try to take his place or start a civil war. It may sound cruel, but in the ancient world, this was how kings survived. Alexander didn't just want to keep the throne. He wanted to show that he was not afraid, that he was ready. But it wasn't only the royal family he had to deal with. Across Greece, many city-states had only followed King Philip out of fear. Now that he was dead, some cities like Thebes and Athens thought about breaking away. They believed that the young new king would be weak. They were wrong. Alexander took his army and marched south with incredible speed. When he reached Thebes, he offered them a chance to surrender. They refused, so he attacked the city with full force, destroyed it completely, and sold many of its people into slavery. Only the temples and the house of the famous poet Pindar were spared. The message was clear: disobey me, and this is what happens. After that, the rest of the Greek cities stayed quiet. They had seen what this young king was capable of. Now that he had control over Greece, Alexander turned his eyes to a much bigger goal: Persia. This was not a new idea. His father, Philip, had already started preparing for a war against the mighty Persian Empire before his death. Alexander decided to continue that plan, but he wasn't just going to fight. He wanted to conquer it all. Persia was the richest and most powerful empire in the world at that time. It stretched from modern-day Turkey to Iran and from Egypt to India. No Greek had ever ruled it, but Alexander believed he could. He didn't just want revenge for past Greek defeats. He wanted glory. He wanted to become the greatest conqueror in history. Before leaving, Alexander visited the Oracle of Delphi, where he asked the gods if his mission would succeed. The priestess replied, "You are invincible." Whether she truly believed that or just wanted to please a powerful king, we'll never know. But Alexander took those words seriously. He believed he had divine support, that the gods themselves were on his side. He also visited the tomb of Achilles, the hero of the Iliad, and left gifts there. Achilles had been his hero since childhood. Now Alexander was ready to follow in his footsteps, but on a much larger scale. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont with 35,000 troops. It was a bold move. He was far from home, leading a smaller army into enemy territory. But he was confident. He even threw a spear into the soil as he stepped onto Asian land and declared it his by right of conquest. It was more than just a battle cry. It was a statement to the world. I have come to take what is mine. He didn't have to wait long for his first test. The Battle of the Granicus River came quickly. Persian satraps, governors, had gathered their forces to stop Alexander's army as it tried to cross the river. It was a dangerous situation. Crossing a river while under attack could have ended in disaster. But Alexander led the charge himself. He fought with bravery and personal courage. At one point, he was nearly killed, struck on the helmet and almost knocked out. But one of his soldiers saved him just in time. The battle ended in victory. Alexander had won his first major fight, and it would not be his last. Back in Macedonia and Greece, the people were watching closely. Could this young king really defeat the Persians? After the victory at Granicus, many began to believe he could. And his army believed in him too. He didn't just give orders from a distance. He fought side by side with his men, shared their food, slept under the same sky. This created deep loyalty. They didn't see him just as a king, but as a brother in arms. But this was only the beginning. Persia had many more troops, much more land, and a powerful king named Darius III. Alexander had won his first battle, but many challenges still lay ahead. In the next chapter, we'll follow Alexander through his greatest military victories, facing Darius in dramatic battles, leading his men deeper into enemy land, and slowly building an empire that no one had ever seen before. You don't want to miss it, because the real glory is just about to begin. Chapter 3: Into the Fire. Battles that made him great. Alexander was now in Asia. He had crossed the Hellespont. He had won his first major battle at the Granicus River, and he was just getting started. The Persian Empire was massive, and he had only scratched the surface. Still, this victory gave him the confidence and the momentum he needed. It also sent a message to the Persians. This was no ordinary invader. Alexander wasn't just coming to fight. He was coming to take everything. But taking an empire wasn't going to be easy. The Persian king, Darius III, was preparing a massive army to stop him. Alexander knew that tougher battles were coming, and he was ready to face them. After the Battle of Granicus, Alexander didn't rest. He kept moving east, liberating city after city. In places like Sardis, Halicarnassus, and Miletus, he showed a mix of military skill and clever leadership. Sometimes he used diplomacy. Other times, he used force. But everywhere he went, people began to see him not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. He often respected local cultures, spared the people, and even restored local rulers who supported him. This was smart. It helped reduce resistance and allowed him to move quickly. But he never forgot his goal: to reach Darius and to defeat him. That chance came sooner than expected. In 333 BC, Alexander and his army reached the plains near the town of Issus. Here they met the massive Persian army led by King Darius himself. It was the first time the two leaders would face each other. Alexander's army was outnumbered, some say by as many as 2-1. But numbers were not the only thing that mattered. Alexander had experience, confidence, and an army that trusted him completely. And most importantly, he had a plan. The Battle of Issus was brutal. Darius had positioned his troops along a narrow plain between the mountains and the sea. It should have been perfect for defense, but Alexander used the terrain to his advantage. He struck hard and fast, charging with his cavalry directly at the heart of the Persian army. The fighting was intense. Bodies clashed, swords rang out, and chaos ruled the battlefield. At one point, Alexander saw Darius himself and led a direct attack toward him. Darius panicked and fled, leaving behind his chariot, weapons, and even his family, his wife, children, and mother. Alexander didn't harm them. In fact, he treated them with great respect. This showed his strength and his honor. He didn't need to humiliate Darius. The victory was enough. The Battle of Issus was a turning point. News spread quickly. The mighty King Darius had run from battle, and Alexander was now the true power in the region. But again, Alexander didn't stop. He kept moving. Next, he turned south, into Phoenicia and then Egypt. These places were under Persian control, but many welcomed Alexander. In Egypt, he was treated like a god. The priests even crowned him as a pharaoh. This moment changed him. He started to believe not just that he was a king, but that he might be divine, a man chosen by the gods to rule the world. In Egypt, Alexander founded one of the greatest cities in history, Alexandria. It was built near the sea, and it would later become a center of learning, trade, and culture. But Alexander didn't stay there long. He had unfinished business with Darius. So, in 331 BC, he began the march toward the heart of the Persian Empire. The final showdown came at Gaugamela, a wide, open plain in modern-day Iraq. This time, Darius had prepared a massive army, perhaps 250,000 soldiers, with chariots, cavalry, and even war elephants. Alexander had far fewer men, but once again, he had a strategy. He studied the land, moved his troops carefully, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. When the battle began, Alexander used a brilliant trick. He led his troops slightly to the right, pulling the Persian army off balance. Then, with perfect timing, He launched a powerful attack straight at the center of Darius's line. It worked. The Persian army broke apart. Once again, Darius fled. The Battle of Gaugamela was Alexander's greatest victory. He had crushed the main Persian force and broken the power of Darius. After this, most of the Persian Empire was his. He entered Babylon, one of the richest cities in the world, and was welcomed as a king. From there, he took Susa, Persepolis, and other great cities, collecting massive amounts of gold, treasure, and ancient knowledge. But despite all this, Alexander wasn't satisfied. He had done what no Greek or Macedonian had ever done. He had defeated the Persian Empire. He could have stopped. He could have returned home as a hero. But Alexander had a different dream. He wanted more. He wanted to go further. He wanted to rule not just Persia, but the world. In the next chapter, we'll follow Alexander as he marches even deeper into unknown lands, faces new enemies, and finally reaches the edge of the world as he knew it. But even as his power grew, something strange began to happen. The young warrior who once fought for glory began to change. Was he still a hero, or becoming something else entirely? Keep watching, because the final chapter of Alexander's rise is the most mysterious of all. Chapter 4: The Man Who Wanted the World. By the time Alexander reached the heart of the Persian Empire, he had already done the impossible. He had defeated the great King Darius not once, but 3 times, taken over some of the world's richest cities, and stood as the ruler of an empire that stretched from Greece to modern-day Iran. But Alexander wasn't ready to stop. His dream wasn't just to conquer Persia. He wanted to go beyond, to find the edge of the world, to explore the unknown, and to make his name immortal. But as he went further, something inside him began to change. The young king who once fought with his soldiers as an equal now began to act more like a god than a man. After the great victory at Gaugamela, Alexander entered the city of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia. It was a city filled with treasures, history, and power. At first, he acted with respect. He paid tribute to the Persian kings of the past. But one night, during a celebration, something strange happened. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger, maybe it was just wine. But Alexander ordered the burning of the royal palace. The flames rose high into the night sky, and with them, centuries of Persian greatness turned to ash. Some say he did it to send a message that Greek power had replaced Persian glory. Others say he regretted it the next day. Whatever the reason, this moment showed something important. Alexander wasn't just trying to rule. He was trying to erase the past and write a new history, one with himself at the center. But Darius was still alive. He had escaped from Gaugamela and fled east, hoping to rebuild his army. Alexander followed him, relentlessly. Along the way, Alexander faced rebellion, difficult terrain, and growing resistance. His soldiers were tired, but he kept pushing forward. Finally, in 330 BC, Darius was murdered by one of his own men, a Persian noble named Bessus, who hoped to take the throne for himself. When Alexander found Darius's body, he was not pleased. In fact, he was furious. He gave Darius a royal funeral and hunted down Bessus for betrayal. This showed again that Alexander was not just a conqueror. He saw himself as the rightful king of Persia, not just an invader. Now the empire was his, but Alexander still didn't stop. He turned his eyes east, toward India, a mysterious land that Greeks knew little about. As he entered this new region, he faced some of his toughest battles yet. In 326 BC, Alexander fought the famous Battle of the Hydaspes River against King Porus, a strong and proud ruler who used war elephants in battle. The fight was brutal, and the river made it even harder. But Alexander, as always, used clever tactics and managed to win. He was so impressed by Porus's bravery that he didn't kill him. Instead, he made him a friend and ally, allowing him to keep his kingdom. This was classic Alexander, fierce in battle, but wise in victory. After this, however, Alexander's army began to break down. His soldiers had marched for years, through deserts, mountains, and jungles. They were exhausted, homesick, and afraid of what lay ahead. When Alexander announced plans to march even further east, toward lands no Greek had ever seen, the army refused. For the first time, Alexander had to back down. It was a painful moment. The man who had never lost a battle now faced something he couldn't defeat, his own men's will. He agreed to turn back. The journey home was difficult. Alexander chose a harsh route through the Gedrosian desert, where thousands of his soldiers and animals died from heat and thirst. Many began to question his judgment. At the same time, Alexander became more distant. He started dressing like a Persian king, demanded people bow to him, and even began calling himself a god. Some of his closest friends and generals were uncomfortable with this. There were arguments. There were even conspiracies. One of his oldest friends, Clitus, was killed by Alexander himself during a drunken fight. Alexander wept afterward, but the damage was done. The boy who once tamed a wild horse now seemed to be losing control of himself. Finally, in 323 BC, Alexander reached Babylon, the center of his vast empire. He had plans to rebuild the city, explore Arabia, and perhaps go even further. But then suddenly, he became seriously ill. No one knows exactly what caused it. Some say it was malaria, others believe it was poison, and some even think it was exhaustion from years of battle and stress. After days of pain and fever, Alexander the Great, just 32 years old, died. His generals stood around him, waiting for a final order. When they asked, "To whom should the empire go?" Alexander is said to have replied, "To the strongest." These were his last words. With no clear heir, his empire quickly fell apart, divided between his generals, who fought over it for years. But even though his empire collapsed, his legacy never did. Alexander had changed the world. He founded over 20 cities, most of them named Alexandria. He spread Greek language, art, and ideas across Asia and Egypt. He united East and West in ways that no one had before. He became a legend not only in Greece, but also in Persia, Egypt, and India. His story inspired kings, generals, and emperors for centuries. Even today, more than 2,000 years later, we still speak his name with awe. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the rise of Alexander the Great. From a curious boy in Macedonia to a fearless king who ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen, Alexander's story is one of ambition, courage, brilliance, and deep complexity. If you enjoyed learning about the life of Alexander the Great and want to hear more amazing stories from history in simple, clear English, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. What part of Alexander's journey surprised you the most? Or who should we cover next? Your feedback helps me keep making videos that help you learn English and explore the world at the same time. Thanks for watching, and remember, history isn't just about the past. It's full of lessons for today. See you in the next one.